Yeah.
So tell me about like a little bit about the times where you went to Belfast and what that was like for the first time where you're going, okay, do you feel that tension for the first time? You feel kind of the presence of violence around you?
I was a nervous wreck. And bearing in mind that I had lived in Belfast, so I had lived in there at the start of the Troubles, and for maybe 5 or 6 years of my life, I was there. Although I never experienced any of the Troubles, it was very protected from it. But yeah, I mean, I went back and I was petrified. I thought, where do I go? Where can I not go? And I was very conscious of my name, very Catholic name. And there are certain areas of Belfast.
For those of you who don't know, Kieran's name is the same name as one of the heroes of the IRA.
Yeah.
And who actually died in prison from a hunger strike. So that's your name. So there's no...
That's my name.
There's no hiding that one.
Absolutely. And of course, just to clarify, I was not named after him, but just coincident. But there are murals all over Belfast with Kieran Doherty. So there are certain areas of Belfast I could walk into very easily. And there are certain areas of Belfast that I didn't really want to be caught with my press card in my pocket. So yeah, it was, I was petrified, There's no other way to describe it.
And did you start thinking to yourself, well, maybe this isn't the job for me? Or were you thinking to yourself, I'm scared, but this is awesome?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of what I figured.
Yeah.
Because that's sort of the typical, when I talk to obviously all my friends in the military, that's everyone's feeling, hey, I was scared, but that was awesome. Yeah. That's what everybody wants to do. And I mean, as a photographer, when you're in there and there's the potential to have those shots, those moments of human existence that only happen at that place at that time, and you've got that opportunity that...
Yeah. I mean, you're waiting. The worst thing is you get over there and there's nothing happening, because that's what happens, leading up to July the 12th, and then maybe the pockets of violence and that happened usually in the evenings after the pubs closed.
Imagine that.
I mean, yeah. And the one thing it did, it made the flames really stand out when they did throw those petrol bombs. But what you were doing was you'd be doing a lot of driving around, and there would be nothing, and you'd go back to your hotel and you think, oh, okay, what am I going to file today? I'm over here. I'm being paid to be here. I need to be filing some imagery just to sort of justify the air flight out here and whatnot. So, and it would be really tough. And so those were the toughest moments, because you were having to find images that sort of told the story, but they weren't really the reason why you were there. You were sent there because they were expecting trouble. And then you'd be sitting in the bar at night and somebody would say, right, this is happening on the Falls Road. And you'd go, great. And we'd just go straight out there. And if you had something physical happening in front of you, it's almost as if you needed to get one under your belt to calm down, because then you're able to say, okay, I've produced something from here that's noteworthy and newsworthy. And sometimes you could go on those trips and there'd be nothing for a week, and you'd be sitting in your home, there'd be absolutely in your hotel, and there'd be nothing for a week, and that was the worst. But as soon as something did happen, it was then a catalyst for maybe something else to happen. And if there was something happening that night, there was always the clear up the next morning. So that was then the catalyst for actually what would maybe happen during the week. And one thing would lead to another. And you'd end up beginning to feel a little bit more confident. And, I was just watching the guys that were a lot older than me and far more experienced. And I just sort of hung around with those guys, sort of just trying to work out, what do you do? And that's how you learn. You just watch how these other photographers are doing it, and you just think, okay, well, I'll remember that next time. And because these guys came in and they just looked immensely cool, and they sort of knew what they were doing. And also did you ever have a time period where you thought you were more badass than you were? Or were you always pretty humble about, hey, you know what, these guys, they know more than me. I'm just going to watch them and learn. I mean, you obviously thought you were pretty badass when you're like, you know what, I'm not going for the regional paper. I'm going straight to London.
Yeah.
Give me a job. Yeah, you're right. But honestly, I don't know where that came from. I just thought I'd lost enough time. Yeah. I think I can't hang around doing, I mean, no disrespect. And there were no jobs going anyway at the end of the course. So I just thought, well, So badass me, probably not. I mean, I'm still, I'm not really one to work with other photographers now, but when you're working in Fleet Street and you're working for a news agency, you can't help but be in a pack, and you're always working with other photographers. And there are, as time goes by, there are sort of fewer photographers that you begin to sort of look to. You can sort of work out which are the ones that are doing something similar to the way you want to be doing it. And there are others that do their own thing, because all photographers are completely different. You can have 10 photographers standing next to each other and they can all shoot the same picture, but every single image will be completely different because each photographer has decided there's a different part of what's happening in front of him that he wants to concentrate on. So, and that's what I found, was happening a lot, especially if you're sent down to Downing Street to do the Prime Minister. I mean, the Prime Minister would just walk, the door would open, and the Prime Minister would walk out of the door and get into the car and drive off.
You take 47 pictures.
Yeah, and the guy next to you could be a trainee, and he will stand there and he'll shoot the same imagery with the same cameras and the same lens, and that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a guy who's been doing it 20 years and a trainee, because that's a very sort of orchestrated theatrical moment,
Right.
and I wasn't really interested in that sort of stuff. I was interested in the stuff that was really spontaneous, sporadic, and it happened, and you had to be ready for it, and you had to react to it, and that's what I like to do, react to what was happening.
Did you feel like going to Ireland in the late 90s and early 2000s, did you feel that prepared you at all for going to Iraq, for going to the other places that you went to in the world? Was it a good preparatory step? Yeah,
absolutely. And you know what? To be totally honest, I've never even thought about that. That thought has never crossed my mind until you just said it. Did you think that prepared me? And I thought, actually, do you know what? Yeah, of course it did. But it's funny, when you're working, you don't think about things like that. You don't. I mean, if I'd kept a diary, which I've never done. Mm-hmm. In fact, I did when I was in Sri Lanka. But if I'd kept a diary, I maybe would have had a little bit more self-awareness of my progression through my career. But when your priorities are on earning money, and being able to pay the rent, and am I going to get work next week, or is that other guy who's come in who looks quite good, is he going to start getting my shifts? And so you're constantly on your toes, and you're not thinking, and you think, if I get the Northern Ireland gig, I got that and he didn't, that's enough, and that's how you were thinking. You weren't really, I had no structure to my career whatsoever, and I think maybe because the whole thing was so new to me, and I just couldn't get my head around the fact that I was actually making a living as a photographer.